Welcome. This is surface area of prisms and cylinders. In this section, you guys will be able to calculate surface area of prisms and cylinders with hopefully at least 70% accuracy. We're going to check that accuracy through the online homework I'm going to give you guys later on. All right. Surface area, what is it? It's the sum of the area of all the faces in a solid. What you could do to find surface area, for example in this solid, is just find the area of every single surface here and then just add them up. But what I'm going to show you later on is there's some formulas that make that process a little bit quicker. Surface area as opposed to lateral area, which is the area of just the sides. Now, more on that in a little bit because we got to talk about what the bases are in a solid. Let's start with prisms. A prism is a polyhedron with two congruent faces. Now, those two congruent faces, when they are parallel to each other, those are going to be called your bases. So in this top solid, I'm going to highlight this 7x8 rectangle and its parallel congruent base. I'm going to call those two the bases in that prism. Looking at the lower down prism here, I'm going to highlight the triangle closest to me here and the triangle closest to the back. If you notice, these are two congruent and parallel faces, making them the bases, the only bases in that particular prism. Now, once you've identified the bases, you can figure out what the height of your prism is. The height of your prism is just the perpendicular distance between those two bases. In this case, the height of this prism is 12, and in this case, the height of this prism is 3. Once you've identified the bases, then you could identify the lateral faces in your prism, which are essentially just the faces on the side. So right here you have 4 lateral faces. Here's 2 that I'm highlighting for now. Okay. Down in my triangular prism, I've got 3 lateral faces that I'm trying to highlight there. Okay. Being able to identify the bases and the height is probably the most important part of surface area for these prisms. Okay. Now, once you've identified the bases, you could properly call the prism by that base. For example, this is a rectangular prism because its bases are prisms, and this is a triangular prism because its bases are triangles. Let's get into the formulas. Formula for the surface area of a prism. The surface area is equal to 2 times the area of the base. This is why it's important to be able to identify your bases. Plus the perimeter of that base. Remember, perimeter is just the sides of the base added up, times the height of the prism. And once again, we have the 2 examples that I had on the previous slide here. We're going to work out the surface area of these 2 in just a second. But there is your surface area formula for a prism. This area of the base might change. Okay? For example, we said this was a rectangular prism. So the area of our base in that case is going to be a rectangle. This B part might change depending on what kind of base you have. Again, take a look. We have a triangular prism here. So in this case, we would have to replace the B with the formula for the area of a triangle. Okay? On this next slide, I've got the common bases of prisms that you might come across and those area formulas. So these formulas right here, you would substitute into the B part here depending on what kind of base you had. Okay? Let's talk about cylinders. A cylinder is essentially a circular prism. Why? Well, its bases are circles. The formula to find surface area is going to be very similar to that of a prism, but we're going to use the circle formula for area of the base instead. The height, again, is the perpendicular distance between the bases, just like it was with a prism. And the only additional definition we have here is the radius of the cylinder, which happens to be the radius of the circular base. The formula then for volume of a surface area of a cylinder, the surface area formula for a cylinder is 2 times pi r squared, which pi r squared, that's the B part in our formula. If we look at the surface area formula of a prism, What's the base here? It's a circle, so we're going to replace it with the area formula for a circle. Plus the perimeter, which, do we call it perimeter of a circle? No, actually we call it the circumference. And how do you find circumference of a circle? 2 pi r. So this P actually becomes the C of our circle. And then you multiply that by the height of the prism, just like we did with the prism. So to break it down, the surface area formula for a cylinder is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r times the height of the prism.